Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Just thought I didn't do a reaction piece to the Springbok World Cup squad. There's been enough talked about that. But in the meantime, there's been a bunch of messages coming through to me, a bunch of comments on the YouTube channel and on Twitter, other places I've seen that there's some confusion about exactly what the role is of Handre Pollard and Lukhanyo Am going into this World Cup after they weren't named in the initial squad. So I thought maybe I should do at least a video explaining how I understand the situation and how that it's going to play out over the next couple of weeks. Of course, I'm dealing with the facts that I have at hand and the way I understand them as well. I think the box squad was announced. That's the World Cup squad going to the World Cup right now. And while it's terrible that we've lost those three players, Lukhanyo and Handre, who are all exceptional players and probably generational players in terms of their impact to the Bok team. It's really bad losing them, but unfortunately the next guy, as Jacques Nienaber said, the next guy has to step into the role, and that's that. I think what's created the confusion is the way that Jacques answered the question as well, and saying that they're going to the UK with them. I think to start off, let me play that tape. I asked at the press conference, I asked Jacques exactly about the fact that they were gone, how they're going to cope without them, and then even the way he answered, you'll see I was rather a bit perplexed, and I sort of came back with a follow-up, and I asked him, I said, but the way you're explaining it now, it seems that they can still go, but they can only go if there's an injury. This is how he answered it. Jacques, maybe let's just start with the three guys that obviously a lot of people expected to be there, Luat, Handre and Lukhanyo. Maybe just tell us what the situation is there.
Obviously two new injuries, if I can put it like that, in Luat and in in Luat and Lukhanyo. Obviously Lukhanyo got injured over the weekend, and Luat during the week. Lukhanyo, it's a knee, and Luat chest, and then Handre is probably on his way. He's different to them in the sense that he's almost in his return to play, getting back to full fitness, and he'll probably join us. He hasn't had a training session with us yet. And maybe it's a good thing to explain. So what's the difference between a guy like CR and a guy like Ox and a guy like Handre? So CR Ox has done trainings with us, have done the volume and intensity that they must handle in a test week. They've done that, and the volumes and stuff like that. So I don't want to get too scientific. Where a guy like Handre unfortunately hasn't had a training with us yet, but he'll probably in this week will start training with us. Yeah.
But Jacques, I mean, this is the World Cup squad. If I ever right, he can't come now into the World Cup, or is it? Have you made provisions?
No, obviously, if there's an injury, he can come in. Yeah. Obviously, no. This is the World Cup squad. Yeah. If there's an injury, or that's probably the obvious one, or if a player does something to make sure that he deselects himself, or he does something weird, which is in their hands, which I don't think will happen. Yeah.
So with that in mind, that's the way he answered it. I think that's where some of the confusion comes in. There's been a lot of suggestions and I've seen on Twitter that because the final World Cup squads only have to be in at the end of August, beginning of September, that there's some sort of placeholder being put there, with 4 scrum halves that Handre Pollard would come in, Lukhanyo Am would come in, and suddenly those players would fall out of the squad. Now, technically, I suppose that is true. You can do that. But, I mean, knowing the box like I know them as well, and, having worked with Jacques and Rassie for a number of years as coaches, they're not the type to play games like that. I know there's some people that says, but Rassie's the type of guy who comes up with these weird and wonderful things that other people don't, in terms of the disco lights and, being the water boy for the Lion series and things like that. And that's fair enough. Those are technicalities that he's exploited and he's done pretty well with them to his advantage and found out places that other people haven't picked up. This is a very different story to that. So in a nutshell, I mean, the way I've always understood it, and I stand to be corrected, but that's the way I understand it. I've checked with a couple of colleagues this morning, and they understand it the exact same way, is that that the box at the moment, that squad is the squad going to the World Cup. The only way that there'll be changes to that squad, and that's what Jacques said in his answer as well, is if there is an injury, or in his very weird way of saying it, the guy gets deselected, which in the way I understood it to mean is that if a guy in one of these warm-up games gets a red card or does something off the field that probably excludes him, that he gets dropped from the squad like that. But in terms of just dropping players willy-nilly, I don't think that's going to happen. So let's look at that situation. Now, first of all, I mean, it's terrible to have these players. I think it was realised in Handre's case, he hasn't played rugby since the end of the English season. He got the calf injury. They gave him a lot of time to get fit again. And the box made it quite clear that every single one of the 33 guys selected would go to the World Cup and would be able to play a game on Saturday if needed. And that's a huge thing. If you think some of the history and you think back to Chasing the Sun, it was quite easily put up there. When Cheslin Colby got injured in the last World Cup, the box didn't wait around. They said if he doesn't train on a Monday, they can't pick him. And that's sort of been the outgoing point. If a player can't be picked, it can't be picked if he can't train on a Monday. And I think that applies here as well. The box have never been really the ones to play games with selection and that. They name their team on a Tuesday. They don't really worry about what the opposition thinks. They're not into mind games and things like that. If they do play them, they're in other ways, but it's definitely not in terms of selection. They've been very forthright, very consistent in terms of selection. Now, I think one of the reasons that Handre and them probably weren't named in the squad, because my initial point comes back to, if they were going to be helicoptered into the squad, then it would have to follow a certain sort of set of rules. Technically you can do it, but I think the effect on the squad and how do you, on those players that were selected would be immense. I don't think it would be good for squad morale. I think players would talk behind each other's backs and things like that. So I don't think that would ever be a factor, knowing these coaches as well. At all, for me, it comes back to the point which I make to people that make these arguments for me. Why didn't they just name them in the initial squad? No one would have batted an eyelid. We wouldn't have had all these theories flying around about place markers and players going to be parachuted in and dropped and things like that if they just named Lukhanyo and Handre. Of course, Lukhanyo, they said 2 to 4 weeks, but Jacques made the point that was the acute diagnosis, so it could still play out over the next couple of weeks. Could be a bit longer, could be a bit shorter, depending on how he reacts. And Handre hasn't trained with the side yet. I think the fact for rugby fans, as much as we like Handre Pollard, going into a World Cup, it has to be concerning that your main fly-off hasn't kicked a ball yet and hasn't played for the Springboks for more than a year. So that's why, to me, I wouldn't rule out Handre even being involved in one of these two warm-up games. And I think, unfortunately, that will probably just fuel the speculation even more. The point is, if he's going to come into the World Cup as a replacement for an injured player, then with no game time and not having played Test rugby for more than a year, that would be a concern, I think, for any rugby fan. The thing is, with the World Cup, and as far as I understand it, again, this is my knowledge of going to World Cups and covering the Springboks over the years, that you can only replace a player that's played in the tournament. So you can't replace a player that's sort of come with, that's had a niggle, and that's a big problem. So that I can understand why the Boks have also were not wanted to bring players in. And Jacques made the point that in 2011, or he didn't say 2011, in World Cups that he was involved in, and I sort of took it to being that he was talking about 2011. There were players who were injured that were carried through the tournament, and it actually did more harm to the squad than anything else. 2011, there was, I think, John Smith, if I remember right. It's a long time ago, but Butch James, Bakkies Botha, all carried injuries and all were missing for parts of the tournament, and that hampered the Boks in their quest to win the World Cup. As we know, the Boks crashed out in that wonderful Bryce Lawrence game, a memory we really don't remember. I was at the stadium that night. It was a horrible night for Springbok rugby, and I think anybody who remembers that game will remember that as well. So you don't want to take a player into a tournament that's carrying an injury. So they selected a fully fit squad. So now what happens with these, and the way my understanding of it is, Lukhanyo and Handre may be ready by the start of the tournament, but the only way they're going to come into the tournament is if there's an injury to another player. Of course, the Boks have got 2 very hard warm-up games against Wales and New Zealand, and quite a training regime, and it could easily happen that there's an injury to another player. But unless that happens, my understanding is, that they simply wouldn't be able to come into the squad otherwise. I suppose technically not impossible, but I think it just doesn't make sense to me. Not the way this Bok team has operated over the years, not the way they've done their selection policy, and not the way they've backed players who are fit and ready to play. So if any of that happens, then it would be away from the norm, and I think it really would probably, how do you tell a player that he's in the World Cup squad, that he's come, through the selection process, that he's been sort of given a cap and announced on live TV, everybody said he's made the World Cup squad, and then a couple of weeks later you tell him to drop out the squad. I don't think that would do very well in terms of squad morale. Of course, there has been a suggestion to me when I suggested it to one of my colleagues that perhaps what could have happened is that one of those players' names could have been injured already, and he's out of the World Cup, and they've put it one side. I suppose technically that is possible, but the Boks have always, I've seen this management team as a management team that's played open cards with South Africans and with us media, so I don't see that happening either. So that's my take. It's very unlikely. The only way I see Handre Pollard and Lukhanyo Am coming to the squad is if there's an injury. There may very well be. If you think back, we had injuries in 27. Frans Steyn came in because John de Villiers was injured. Chester Williams famously came into the World Cup after the injury. I think it was after the banning of Peter Hendricks, I think it was at that stage with that fight against Canada in 95. If you think in 2019, Jesse Kriel and Trevor Nyakane got injured in the first game. So these things do happen. There are injuries. And they can definitely make an appearance in that. And so it would make sense that if they're going to be ready around the time this tournament starts and aren't in the initial squad, that the Boks keep them in their plans, that if they have to come to the tournament, they can come in and just slot in straight away. And both players can do that after injuries. We've both seen them do that. In terms of Loert de Jager, of course, we're still in the dark about what's going on there. Nobody's been able to offer a proper explanation about that, which only can make me think it's probably a bit more serious than we think. And for that, I wish Loert all well. He's a great guy, and really wish him a speedy recovery, whatever it is. Lastly, just on another point I just want to make, how does those emissions affect the Boks squad? Well, I think if you look at halfback, we've already heard Faf de Klerk's going to be the third 10. It's a rather surprising move. Obviously, the Boks feel they have enough in him that they can do that, and they would know the reasons why, but I think the rest of South Africa maybe is a bit nervous about that, especially if what happens if Manie Libbok picks up an injury and Handre Pollard doesn't make it back. But at the moment, there's no indication of that, so it's one of those things that we're going to have to deal with as the Bok team goes through this World Cup. So that's the third scrum half thing. At lock, I think Franco Mostert and Marvin Orie will deal it out for the number 5 jersey in Loert's absence. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle that one as well. I think Marvin may have the inside line there, and as Jacques said, that's one of the reasons why they gave him game time against Italy. He played against England, he played against Australia, and he played the 2 tests against Argentina. So he's had a lot of game time in the role, so I think they feel comfortable with having him there. The midfield is going to be an interesting one because obviously Caden can play 13, Jesse Krill's great on 13, Damien has played 13 as well, but I think we might see in one of these 2 warm-up games the combination of Damien de Lende and Andre Esthuizen as a midfield combo to see how they go. I can think it's a very physical combo as well, but it'd be just interesting. I think we need to see some more game time on that. Don't be surprised if you see Caden moving there somewhere in the warm-up game, just in the last 10 minutes or so. I would probably see them doing that just to give him a feel of the position as well. But it's going to be papering the cracks in times, and I suppose the measure of their success will be how well they paper those cracks in the World Cup tournament. Anyway, that's a quick video, guys. Tell me your thoughts. What do you think? I don't subscribe too much to all these theories as such. You have to deal in facts, and those are the facts as I know them. Of course, if you know something different, feel free to let me know in the comments as such. I'll try and answer them wherever I can. And please, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to the channel. There'll be more of these videos as we go into the World Cup journey. And keep a lookout for To The Last Drop, the M.com, the Sunday Times rugby writers and myself. We get together every week and we do a podcast We've just done a wonderful one that's out today, which is somewhere on the site here as well, where we speak about the World Cup announcement, and we have the second part of that wonderful interview that we did with Rossi Erasmus and David O'Sullivan about Rossi's book. Excuse me. Yeah, it's all there on the podcast. Yeah, thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Cheers.